we will recap what was a dull game in football and an exciting game in baseball at the end of September. I mean, who would have thought that? We'd be here at the end of September without the postseason, and baseball would steal the headlines today. That is where we are at here on the show. Now, naturally, we'll get to football here in just a minute, but let's start off with the biggest story in sports this morning, which was Shohei Ohtani reaching the 50-50 milestone, putting together one of the best days in Major League Baseball history. I mean, he went 6 for 6. He drove in 10 runs. He stole 2 bases. He hit home run number 49, home run number 50, and then he hit home run number 51 off a position player. Not sure how that happened, by the way, at the end of the game. But regardless, Ohtani had the single best offensive game and maybe best game that I've ever seen play. And it happened to happen in my own backyard as well. A little bit later in the show, we'll get into what happened with the historic baseball, still to be determined there. But naturally, this is the greatest player that we have seen play on a baseball field. I just don't think it comes particularly close. So congrats to Shohei Ohtani. Amazing watching that thing go down yesterday. All right, basketball. We've got a mega contract extension. This feels like one of the richest of all time. Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers have reached a contract extension. It's being reported by Shams this morning, with Woj being retired. 3 years, $192 million over 3 years for Joel Embiid. So now with his contract, with this money through 28-29, his deal is over $514 million. That's the 4th highest in the NBA, behind LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Paul George. 28 points per game over the course of his career. Embiid now looks like, barring something unforeseen, that he'll finish his career in Philadelphia. Meanwhile, it's pretty apparent that Aaron Rodgers will finish his career in New York, but the hope was he would finish on a high note. And if last night's game is any indication, the Jets are certainly on their way. They shut down the New England Patriots from start to finish. This was not a competitive game at all. 24-3 final score there. Brees Hall scored a touchdown. Rodgers threw a touchdown. And certainly at this point, it does appear that the Patriots are headed back to maybe who we thought they would be at the beginning of the season, which is one of the worst teams in the NFL. But give them credit. They played competitive through 2 games. It just appeared as though the short week was not enough to keep them going. Here is Aaron Rodgers, who basically says week by week he's getting closer to who he needs to be.
Yeah, I felt great. I was, feeling real good out there. I felt good pregame. And, I've been progressing. I said to you guys after week 1, it's going to be a process of continuing to extend plays once I feel more comfortable. And this was kind of the first step in playing like I know I'm capable of playing. I felt like I was, myself. After the first touchdown, I felt good. I felt like we had a lot of good drives. We backed up a number of times and switched the field position, and then got points out of drives. I wish maybe I'd thrown that ball to Mike slightly more outside, but that would have been nice to get to 28-3. But man, I'm proud of our guys. We've been improving, but it hasn't been good enough for some people outside the room. So to have a performance like tonight, I don't know how many yards we finished with, but it feels really good.
Yeah, I think well said by Aaron Rodgers. I mean, the Jets, did not play great the first 2 games. You have nothing negative to say if you're a Jets fan this morning. They dominated the Patriots from start to finish. That did not make the head coach of the New England Patriots happy. Gerard Mayo basically says the game was more or less a failure on their part.
Look, not good in any phase of the game. Felt like we had a good game, X's and O's wise. We just didn't go out there and execute, and that's what it comes down to every Sunday. I told the guys, this is NFL football. This is what it is, and we just have to be better. So the guys will be off the next few days. Told them to, get their minds right, get their bodies right, and then come back and be ready to work. Got a bonus Monday. Got another good team that we're going to go against next week. Just got to be better. The first thing, I got to look at myself in the mirror and make sure that, I did everything I could to get the guys ready to go. And, based on the score today, I need to do more. But going back to what I said earlier, just got to hit the reset button. It's NFL football, and we have to get better.
And the Patriots, of course, have a young quarterback named Drake May who's going to play eventually. I don't know if that'll happen next week. We'll see. All right, let's talk about Jeremiah Smith. Do you know Jeremiah Smith's name? Well, you will now, because he has signed an NIL deal, first ever deal with the company Red Bull. It's the first college football athlete to ever land a deal with the company. He's 18 years old. He plays on the Ohio State Buckeyes. He caught 6 passes for 92 yards against Akron. He also had 5 receptions for 119 yards and a 70-yard score last week. He's a good player, and Red Bull now has their NIL sponsor. In the NFL, the San Francisco 49ers are banged up. So are the Los Angeles Rams. They're playing each other this week. Will George Kittle play for San Francisco? Not really sure. He left last week's game. They said it was just cramps, but now the 49ers say he has a hamstring injury. These injury reports with the 49ers are kind of curious this year, to say the least. Travarius Ward also missed practice. Nick Bosa has been limited. The 49ers are down to 6.5-point favorites against the Rams, who won't have Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp or a couple defensive players in that one. Meanwhile, Justin Jefferson says that he is playing against the Texans this week, saying, oh, yeah, for sure, so we'll trust him there. T. Higgins back on the field for the Cincinnati Bengals, but he is limited with a hamstring injury. We're not sure if he's going to play on Monday night against Washington. More fantasy football discussion coming your way tomorrow morning with me and George Kurtz, 7 a.m. Eastern, exclusively here on SportsGrid. New quarterback for the Texas Longhorns, Quinn Ewers, is still out. Arch Manning, for the time being, is taking over. We saw him play at a high level last week. Ewers is recovering from an oblique injury, and Texas plays Saturday night against Louisiana Monroe. So this should be an easy matchup for him before Texas gets serious in the SEC. Meanwhile, the Gators' Eugene Wilson underwent knee surgery. 13 receptions, 191 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's out for the season. Appalachian State last night, as a big underdog, beat South Alabama 41-19. The underdog season continues in college football. Meanwhile, tonight, Illinois takes on Nebraska with the Huskers 7.5-point favorites. Stanford is at Syracuse. 8.5-point favorites are Syracuse. And then San Jose State is at Washington State, with Washington State being 12.5-point favorites in that game. Amongst other news in Major League Baseball, not named Shohei Ohtani, Yankee fans are holding their breath for Juan Soto. He had a scary slide into the wall last night, went to get x-rays. We'll see if Ohtani is in the lineup at all this weekend. We'll see what the injury exactly is. The Baltimore Orioles finally get a win. They walked off the Giants last night. They're now within 4 games of the American League East. The Cleveland Guardians have clinched a playoff spot. Great season for them. They end up beating the Twins. The Twins are now tied with the Tigers for the final wild card spot in the American League, and the Mets scored double-digit runs for the 3rd game in a row as they're trying to chase down the wild card spot in the National League as well. In the WNBA, they're showing up in droves to see Caitlin Clark, a new record crowd to see her as the Fever lost the season finale against the Washington Mystics. 92-91 was the final in that game. Tina Charles set 2 records as the Dream clinched the final playoff spot, 78-67 over the New York Liberty. Atlanta is in. Also news from Live Golf, players are allowed on the U.S. Ryder Cup team, the PGA of America said yesterday. And in the National Hockey League, as training camp is opening, the Detroit Red Wings signed defenseman Moritz Seider to a 7-year deal, $60 million. He was the 6th overall pick by Detroit back in 2019. Welcome back to Newswire here on SportsGrid. Today we have Jim Gazzali from Legal Sports Report in the house. We're going to cover the latest on Bet365. Seems like they've been in the news a ton for changing odds in different ways. We're going to get to that. We'll get to Fanatics as well. But Jim, welcome back to the show. It is great to catch up with you. And I know we're going to dive in here. I got to be honest, I kind of miscalculated this story a little bit. I honestly thought that Bovada, the offshore sports betting company who has been around for a really long period of time, way before sports betting was legal, I thought that these threats that these different states were making to them to shut down operations in legal states, I thought they wouldn't take it seriously and just proceed as usual, because they've sort of proceeded under their own auspices for many, many years. But now they're restricted in 14 different states. And quite frankly, Jim, I'm a little surprised. I was wrong. I thought they would just keep rolling and not listen to anyone.
Yeah, certainly, Craig. And I think what we've seen over the last handful of months, really going back to the early parts of this year, where a bunch of states had been sending these cease and desist letters to Bovada. It does seem, though, at least this year, that they are sort of heeding that warning and restricting access in those states where they do receive that cease and desist letter. So what we saw over the last couple of weeks and months, Kansas, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania being added to that list of restricted U.S. sports betting markets for Bovada. Kansas, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania all sending their own separate cease and desist letters within the last couple of months. Kansas, I believe, sent theirs in July, and Louisiana and Pennsylvania sent theirs last month in August. We've seen, like I said off the top, a handful of states take this action so far this year. Michigan, Connecticut, Colorado, and Ohio did the same, and all of those states as well included in those 14 restricted markets. Massachusetts, interestingly enough, they do have one of the most public and outspoken band of sports betting regulators. They like to do a lot of public-facing things in terms of meetings and rulemaking and whatnot. I spoke to some people over there the other day, and they told me that they'll have an update on their actions against Bovada coming up at a committee meeting, a gaming commission meeting coming up in the next several weeks, though they have not yet sent a cease and desist letter to Bovada or any illegal offshore bookmaker for that matter. And, of course, Craig, like we all know, the offshore sports books, very limited, if any, customer protections, unregulated, untaxed, in direct contrast to the legal betting markets, the legal sports books that are heavily regulated in the U.S., of course, with varying regulations across different states, but now 14 restricted markets for Bovada in the U.S.
Okay, fair enough. And, we'll see if this means less of a future for some of the other offshore sports books as well. All right, a couple of Monday nights ago, Jim, it was a big story how Bet365, essentially like everybody else thought Christian McCaffrey was going to be playing on Monday night. He did not. And so Jordan Mason played. Mason had a huge game for the San Francisco 49ers. Bet365 tried to walk back some potential odds on Mason and then did a second walk back and say, okay, we'll pay out everybody, even though these were not the correct odds. They're in the news a lot for this, unfortunately, and now another fine coming in the state of New Jersey. So what do you think, Jim? Does Bet365 sort of not have a handle on this stuff here? I know that they're mostly overseas and involved in soccer and some of the other sports, but this is just not really a great look for them in September.
Yeah, and it does seem like these fines have been for similar things where they are just unilaterally changing odds without getting approval from New Jersey sports betting regulators, which is required by law in New Jersey. Of course, some other states don't have that requirement, and sportsbooks are allowed to change these sort of glaring errors, let's call them. So this latest fine actually came before that Monday night odds change and comes on the heels of a $500,000 fine that Bet365 got in New Jersey in July for, again, changing odds without approval. So the fines came down in August, and this spanned from February of 2022 through January of 2023. There are a variety of different issues, almost $260,000 in bets that had to be voided and refunded across a variety of errors, really, where either the game or the match that they were taking bets on had already finished, or in one instance, a college basketball game tip-off got moved up by an hour. So the game was already underway. They being Bet365, did not adjust the start time in their app. So the pregame odds were still available while the game was going on. And then again, they just automatically changed the odds without approval. A variety of other things where there were MMA fights on tape delay that were a week old that they were accepting wagers on. And obviously somebody somewhere would have knowledge of who won that match. So of course that is not allowed. And they also did take some bets on Rutgers football, which in New Jersey, right, you can't bet on in-state college teams or athletes. So overall, a variety of different mishaps and errors on Bet365's part. So New Jersey regulators again hit them with another $33,000 fine in August, which, like I said, came on the heels of that $500,000 fine from July, and just prior to the Jordan Mason fiasco that we saw on Monday night, a few days after this fine got announced by regulators in New Jersey.
Yeah, I feel like this has got some attention, but if it happens one more time on the big stage, I feel like it's going to get a massive amount of attention. All right, let's end with some good news in sports betting. Let's head over to Massachusetts, where they've had a number of different operators come in and out of there. Let's get to the latest on Fanatics. They opened up shop this year in Massachusetts. What do the numbers say?
Yeah, I thought Fanatics had a pretty decent August. They had their highest volume ever in a single month in Massachusetts, nearly $26 million. Their previous high was just shy of $24 million earlier this year in March. So I reached out to Fanatics to see what they thought might be contributing to this boost in handle for them in Massachusetts. And the spokesperson there told me that customers are really responding well to some app enhancements, namely their Parlay Hub, which, Craig, as you know, we've spoken a lot about the different tech behind a lot of these parlay products, and that is where a lot of these sports books seem to find a point of difference amongst a crowded field of sports books. So for Fanatics, they enhanced that parlay product. Customers are really responding well to that. They also increased their betting markets. So again, trying to compete with the FanDuels and DraftKings of the world, where you could seemingly bet on anything that you could think of. Fanatics has enhanced their the number of markets that they offer across sports, and that has helped contribute to their highest volume month ever in Massachusetts at nearly $26 million in August.
All right, big numbers there for Fanatics. Jim, good luck in your fantasy matchups this week. I know you're all into that. We'll talk again next week here on Newswire.
All right, thanks, Greg.